Hi, welcome back to yet another episode of Kids Eat Toast Sometimes, the podcast. We keep getting renewed by HBO. Today's guest, yet another fantastic, exciting South African. She's an artist, she's a teacher of sorts, and above all, she's a fantastic human being. Dayna-Gay Tate, how are you doing?
Hi, Sam.
And how are you doing? How's lockdown treating you? It's the standard question.
I'm good. Life hasn't changed that much for me in terms of sitting alone at home all day while I work. So not much actually shifted. But I think, what can you do, really?
What can you do? Exactly. And I love how people are always like, how are you coping? It's like you're like recovering from like a drug addiction or something. But meanwhile, we're just like prancing around with masks on and like erratic sleeping patterns. But the world is weird. How is the mental health? That's always big.
Are you asking me?
Oh yeah. How is your mental health?
I'm like, rhetorical. Are we exampling? Are you asking?
No, I'm asking you, you maniac. How's your Clearly, it's not doing too well, some would say.
Like we're a bit off the bat at the moment, eh? Well, actually, I haven't left my house in 3 days. So by house, I mean 1 room. In 3 days. So today, we're feeling a little bit woozy in the brains. To be honest, I was really hoping I'd be able to survive this interview. But mental health has been really interesting. I think it probably depends on whether you really love humans or not, and whether you need them around you. So, I was super grateful to be able to get outside. I think that was the big shift with lockdown for most people, actually being able to see
definitely.
Humans.
Well, I mean,
definitely rely on other people for a lot of the peace up in the brain,
Of course. And like for an artist, you need your environment to like inspire you and your like everyday interactions. But I also feel like even in this like very brief interaction, or if I go to the petrol station to fill up, a whole tank of white privilege, eh? No, if I go through, it's like I'm not anxious about speaking to someone, but like I miss social cues. I'm awkward. Like this was almost the perfect example. And the only thing I truly believe in, more than I even believe in myself, is this tiny little mask, which I think is hilarious. But you have to hold on to something. Wow. No, it's all too much. And you've spoken briefly about being in your 1 room. I know you're quite into your like feminist literature, and I wouldn't classify or peg Virginia Woolf down into that like feminist thing, not because she isn't, but I think she's just wonderful that she doesn't need to be pegged down anywhere. And she obviously writes that extended essay, A Room of One's Own, which focuses on having your own space, and women need resources and to own their own resources to create. How have you found that in terms of studio space, and what has been your primary go-to? Have you been working from home? Have you been able to outsource to a studio? What's the modus operandi, so to say?
So I mean, I think something that I'm really passionate about space. I'm really passionate about making space, designing space, cultivating space. And so this is something I've thought about a lot. And I know a lot of artists, one of our greatest, like, I suppose, struggles is how to do what we love and get paid for it. And then on top of that, afford a studio space, and it's very commonplace among artists to not have the financial access to a separate space. So that's actually where I find myself at the moment. But it's been really cool. I see it as a challenge to like, well, I've never been someone, I mean, I've just really learned to look at what's in my hands and like, what can I do with it, and be grateful for the space that I do have, which I'm so thankful for. And so it's been really cool for me. I think this year definitely has cemented, obviously with lockdown as well, just the decision to break through that, like, I don't have another space, or I don't have a space, which does come. I mean, it's sometimes really frustrating, like, because I want to paint a massive painting and I can't paint a massive painting because I can't. Like, there's no space for it. But I think I think there's like, I really believe there's a beauty in just, how do I phrase it? In desiring more, or being hungry for something new, or being hungry for a greater space, or being hungry for something that would give you more access to a process, or give you more access to an outcome. I think there's a beauty in the tension between that, and just literally recognizing today, I might kick the bucket today, Samuel. I really might. I might not make it home tonight. Okay. And by home, I might not make it to my bed from the floor here, like I might not make it. And I know that can sound super morbid, but I've genuinely found a lot of life living with the presence of death, dare I say. Just like realizing I could kick it. And I don't want to spend today really frustrated that I don't have what I think I want or what I think I need. And I mean, like, what we want and what we need is a whole nother conversation, and I have some thoughts on that. But yeah, I think all in all, it's been really cool to see how my creative process I'm learning how to not have it be dictated by my frustration at not having access to something, and actually just being seriously gratitude, like, will wreck your life if you lean into it. And so I think with that, I don't want to do something out of frustration. I want to do it because there's a genuine like outpouring. And I think every artist is different. Like, please don't take this as everyone's approach. I know every artist is and also artists are, me included, quite particular about our opinion being ours and not being put on us by someone else, Absolutely. And I think you may agree.
No, for
and
sure.
Feel some of that sentiment. Sam loves a good opinion being pushed on him, eh?
Oh, no, I don't like anyone telling me what to do. But he says, whilst the M5 like traffic reverberates outside his room recording the podcast. So no, I think you made like a few really, really interesting and compelling points. I've always, and it seems it's made its way more into like the mainstream way of thinking. But like, as you alluded to there, gratitude is massive. And I think if you center anything, whether it's your practice, creative practice, your relationships, to what you're reading, I think it is a really good way to go about life. And like you said, that we have been, and I've felt the exact same too, and you've made you've verbalized it very well, in the sense that with corona and death, and like if parents are feeling slightly ill, all that sort of stuff, you are brought much closer to life, because, death is not too far away. Whether usually in like our wonderful bubbles, it's all happy-go-lucky all the time, and almost the Grim Reaper's like presence actually elicits quite a lot of strange happiness. I know my family, we've probably laughed and talked and just had a real strange time together, but it's the happiest we've been, and that almost sounds a bit perverse given the like dreadful way the pandemic's made its way through the world and the real hardships that people are facing. But it's a strange antagonism. But we'll jump off this a bit very deep already. Someone was like, your podcast, they're sometimes depressing. And I was like, that's a feedback I'm going for. That's wonderful. So I will ask you, and you were already making some complaints on WhatsApp about your toast. Where is your toast? This is Kids Eat Toast. I never have toast. I'm starting to feel like a sham. What have you gone for today?
Today, Samuel Holmes. I am representing a large part of Cape Town's community with a rice cake, but with a rice cake. Okay?
Okay. No,
okay, but you can't actually be mad, because if I ate bread, I wouldn't make it through the conversation,
Okay. Is this a gluten intolerance?
Right. So this isn't me actually improvising out of servant heart to your podcast.
And what have you put on it? Because it looks quite fancy from here.
It is quite fancy. Look, I ran out of July was a bit of a low month in terms of artistic financial return, so I haven't really been able to shop yet at the beginning of August.
I love that.
So I had a tiny bit of what one calls tahini.
Oh yes, big and white culture, massive.
Yes, and the fact that I am battling this first week of August is because I bought the tahini last month. Do you see what I mean? So it's kind of like a dark cycle.
Mm.
And then, but anyway, we have a banana and we have some cinnamon. So
Okay.
yeah, I usually sometimes if I'm feeling like real gutsy, I'll like sprinkle some salt on there for like a bit of
Okay. Cool. Wild evening.
No,
The
truly, like
tahini.
it really presses a boundary. So
Mm.
that's where we're at, Sam, and
Okay.
yeah, and like you said, like it can tell a story about who you are, and honestly, it's it's a story about a really hard financial job.
A tough financial couple of months combined with the
Oh my gosh, I'm joking.
the collective Cape Town allergies or allergens in I don't know. I'm only teasing you, of course. I convinced myself for 2 years that I was lactose intolerant. I don't know how I managed to convince myself and then other people, but I have subsequently been abusing lactose in any variety. Um, I don't know. And based on my personal experience, I believe this all to be a sham. So I believe your allergen is a sham. My stomach's sore. Ah, come on. No.
Uh, well, I'm actually one of the few who doesn't actually experience the whole stomach thing. So
Okay.
I literally will, like I say, I'll pass out on you probably. And fun, yeah, he needs alcohol. And and insane headaches. So
Ooh.
if you want me to like tear up on you a little, I'm joking. I've learned to
Mm.
look. I just carry drugs with me. I pop them when I want the cake, and then we're done with it. So
Okay, nice. No, of course I was only teasing you, Dayna-Gay, but I can't wait for the pushback to happen because all these people are like, oh, these allergens don't exist, like gluten. Come on, people, we've been eating it for centuries. So I'm waiting for my first like double lactose coffee, and then we'll chat, probably on the toilet. But besides the
yeah, let me
point,
know how that goes.
but let's get away from this toilet talk. Come on, and one of the main things I think of when I think of Dana is this fantastic artist. And when I was looking back at some of your like Instagram work, and obviously I've been to your family house on like countless occasions, your style's quite hard to pin down. The best description I could give it is that you are currently having an affair of sorts with watercolors. Would that be fair? What are you dealing with at the moment?
I mean, watercolors and I have a bit of a story. Um, actually, no, you are very off,
Oh,
Samuel. Yes, your stalking obviously did not produce successful information.
happens to the best of us.
Um, no, Sam, I teach watercolor. That's where a lot of the watercolor happens.
Mm-hmm.
So running those online courses, that's some of the noise you might have seen me rattling off about on the gram.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I found I do love watercolor. I really do. For me, the reason I pursue it and teach it is because it's something that makes art accessible to a lot of people. And in terms of humans actually being able to get into the process themselves, it's one of the more economical art forms. It's one of the art forms where if you invest in the material initially, it can last you, I'm talking up to 10 years. Like it's a very amazing material. I mean, medium. And so one of the reasons I started teaching it was because I really believe in empowering people creatively, and I could talk about this for ages.
For sure. Well, while we're here, let's chat about it, and then we can circle back to what you actually do and not what I've
And not
failed
what
to
you said
see.
wrong.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd be
Great.
happy to rectify you. I don't know if you've noticed this about our friendship. Yeah.
Indeed.
Um, I am pretty pissed off at the way culture and humanity has squashed creativity in humans. And I get pretty passionate about the difference between creativity and a creative and artist, being creative and being artistic. Because I truly believe that creativity is a birthright, just by virtue of being human. And I so often I hear people say, no, but I'm not creative. And I'm like, what does that mean? Or like, I can't draw, I can't paint. I'm like, excuse you, that's not what being creative is. Create literally means to make. Create literally means to bring about something into life that hasn't existed before, or to mold something new. And as a human being, our relationships are creative. Cooking is creative. Exercise is creative. Sport is creative. Engineering is creative. Dare I say it? Accounting can be creative. I know I know that one really hits a level on some people.
Controversial thing I think that's been said on this podcast up until this point. Wow.
Aim to please. No, I really do believe it, because you can't create without being creative. And so how could anyone have ever formed or even come up with the whole accounting system without being creative?
Of course.
So yeah, so I really believe that there's a lie that exists in humanity about you not being creative. I believe it is a lie. I started teaching to break that, and to break the fear around creativity. And I found that something like watercolor, which you cannot have control over, and if the more control you try to have over it, the more it sucks, and the more your piece actually just starts to die on you. And it's really tricky for people to not have control over something. But what I found in my workshops and in my classes is that people, when you break through any kind of lie, you break into a freedom. That's what happens, right? Because it's replaced by a truth. And so I have come to see teaching as a really, like, it's a tool to break that lie, break that fear, as I said, and to allow people to start believing something that is actually true about them, which is that they're creative. Doesn't mean that they have to become an artist, doesn't mean that they have to, have their image be brilliant, or whatever that even means, seriously. But the process itself is what I'm really passionate about. And the amount of freedom that people have gained in some of those teaching spaces has been one of my greatest encouragers to keep going. And also some of the spiritual pushback. I know we're not talking about this yet, but atmospheric pushback that I sense in trying to break through this gets tense, and you can sense fear in a room, and you can sense the lie, like trying to steal from that person in a moment. And it has been one of the most beautiful things to witness people staying. Some people have cried at the table in front of their artwork because they realize something's getting hit that they have always struggled with, so there's and this can also lead into like art therapy, and there's so much that this can continue into. But and I'm not an art therapist, but I believe in the power of creativity to heal truth into somebody's being and into somebody's identity. And so that's a lot of what sort of spurs on my passion about this. And yeah, so what's been really powerful about it all is seeing that it's not that theory about us being creative by nature and that it's in our DNA has actually been proven time and again through the classes I've had the privilege to teach and through some of the workshops I've been able to host. It's not bull. It actually is real, and that's really encouraging to me.
Yeah, Dayna, you've said a few things that really struck a chord with me, and I'll start with the last thing you said. Almost teaching is a privilege. I absolutely love that sentiment, and I wish it was understood and maybe appreciated by more, and that teachers and those that teach in whatever capacity, if it's coaching, actually teaching in a classroom, lecturing, whatever, has been a mentor, deserved and got more recognition, whether it be financial or otherwise, because it is just such a, like you've said there, to witness the process of someone breaking down, if you will, in front of their artwork that you've helped. And I know you wouldn't attach yourself to it, but you've helped this person through something, whether you like it or not. And it's just so beautiful and filled with so many moments like that. And the second thing that you said that really resonated with me, and I thought was actually beautiful in itself, was that, and I don't know, because I'm not too well versed in watercolor myself, but so I don't know if you're borrowing, what is it? If you're borrowing metaphors and analogies of that sort from your own research that you've done, but the concept that watercolors are uncontrollable when you're trying to achieve like what we almost view as a commodity, art as a commodity, and the watercolor just going against that. And not only that, but the fact that it very simply plainly reflects that you cannot control everything as hard as you try. So, and that segues quite nicely into what I wanted to chat to you about in terms of your whole application to study at Michaelis, obviously UCT's art school, and the process of rejection and how that played out with you, and like how that affected, because you've clearly meditated on it, and even in the sense that it could just be crippling. I mean, it's a horrible thing to go through, rejection, but it speaks interestingly to your point about creativity and society giving it a stamp of whether you're creative, whether you're not creative, and for a creative school to be like, no, not this year. How did you feel about that, and how did you deal with that in the end, I guess, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, as you say, loaded question, just because, and you touched on this already, there's so many ways that I could respond to this. I can respond from what I deem to be more of a humanly response, which surprise, I am a human, so that is valid. But I could also, for me, also simultaneously respond from a more spiritual perspective. But, and I'm careful to use the word spiritual because that needs some defining. But I'm going to speak more from what I hope could help people. And I think rejection is really difficult only if you attach what you applied to your identity.
Wow, I'm loving this already. Positively titillated. I think this is gonna start circulating on like motivational Pinterest boards and Tumblr. We're coming for you, Tumblr. I'm excited. Okay, sorry, Dana. Continue.
No, it's fine. I'm glad that it elicited an excitement. Yeah, I really, something that doesn't define you can't hurt you. Like I've experienced this in my life, and I've experienced being really hurt and pushed down, and sometimes feeling like dehumanized by things that used to be attached to my identity and used to be attached to the definition of me. And I don't subscribe to any of those things anymore, and I haven't for a few years. And through an experience of a lot of love, I've been able to just see more clearly where the boundary of who I am and what defines me ends. And this is something that I think I didn't always feel this way. And art, I think maybe only in the last 2 years have I been, and I've been an artist my whole life, but I've been pursuing it intentionally since about probably 2009, 2010, when I made some specific decisions with subjects and stuff. And obviously studied a visual arts degree. And only in the last 2 years have I started to see the need to separate myself as artist and daughter, actually.
And it is very interesting to like even realize that you have to split yourself into different identities, and they all mesh and it's all messy. And that's a very exciting thing about life. And just my one thing on rejection before we open up a bigger can of worms. poor imagery there, but is I came across this fantastic Steve Martin quote. And Steve Martin, if you're not like familiar, was that he's the dad in Cheaper by the Dozen, and he started to lose it towards the end, but before that he had a fantastic career as a comedian. And he's doing one of those like TED Talk type things, classic. You know, everyone's done a TED Talk. Can't believe Ted hasn't called me up yet for one. But he's doing one of those talks, and someone asked him about how he deals with rejection. And I'm like paraphrasing here, but he responded, rejection? Well, when I got my first rejection, that's when I knew I had ticked that box and I was well on my way to being a successful comedian. So I do very much share that sentiment that, not that I'm on my way to being a successful comedian, but that it is very crucial in the process, because it does bring about a level of introspection, whether you have to be like you mentioned, oh, I've attached way too much of a talent or something that I'm able to do as who I am as a person and as my identity, which makes things really hard. That's why sportsmen, when they stop playing and have to come off the highs of playing rugby, and that's who they are, well, turn into these terrible alcoholics. That's like why the Ike Tigers have a drinking problem, you know, because who are we off the rugby field? I'm only joking. I've got a lot of Ike Tiger friends, but to that sort of effect. And central to how you deal with rejection is most definitely a belief system. And this is something that I really wanted to explore with you, because you and your family are some of the most pure practitioners of faith, if you will. I know you probably won't even like that description, but it's what I'm giving you. And so, yeah, if you'd like to open up about how you let Christianity and Jesus shape not only rejection, but I think art on a grander scale and in your creative process, I'd be very interested.
Cool. Thanks, my friend. What did you say? Practitioners
Practitioners
of
of
faith.
faith, yeah. I'll get you I'll get you a t-shirt. We are the best practitioners of faith.
I'm keen. As long as Zap, Shells, Jodes, and Gala and I all get one, you know, like team family vibes.
Oh yeah, you know Shelley's my favorite, so she's got one for free.
No, I know. Everyone knows Shelley's your favorite. So yeah, thanks. Also, just like thanks again that you welcome the just like, yeah, welcome the honesty from me. I really appreciate that. Another thing that you said just now about what Steve Martin said got me thinking. So I almost want to circle back when I was talking about how something can't, I suppose, stamp on you to the point of some kind of permanent hurt if it doesn't hold any defining power, permanent defining power over you. And I think that this is something that all humans do have to learn, because and I grew up someone radically sensitive. Like, you get people who, you know, are sensitive, and then you get Dayna in the corner on her own, like crying home from school every day for years, seriously, very sensitive. And as I've grown up, I've realized that it's actually something that has become a strength, and it's actually now it's actually become a tool, and it's become a weapon in life, as opposed to it being a weapon for love, though not for the sucky stuff. And so I think what's been amazing and so releasing for me, and it has happened not really by my own doing, but by being loved through community, being loved by God, and his what I experienced to be this very real, tangible presence and conversation and relationships. So it's been through where this answer stems from, because I think rejection, I truly believe, is a gift. It's a gift if you let it be. For me, that rejection from UCT was actually just a directional answer to prayer for me. I had been seeking direction, and I had applied to a few different avenues, and I had just said, well, whatever doors close and whichever one stays open, like that's where I go. But I know that it's often easier said than done when you're really passionate about something. And what I wanted to actually speak to with a lot of compassion is artists who get told that, or get rejected from some kind of space or some kind of institution or some kind of course. I don't want to undermine through what I'm saying. I don't want to undermine what that can do, because I very rarely myself experienced this intertwining of artist with who I am as a person. I'm an artist. So people say, what do you do? I'm an artist. And like that's where that shift for me was so powerful, when I was like, actually that's not my first, that's not my front, that's not what I go into the world as. I actually go into the world as someone who is loved by her Father, and that's where my relationship with God has become massively important, because it has lightened so much of the, you're this, no you're not that, but you could be this, but you can't be because we said so, but they didn't say it, but we want to say it, and remember that one time that one person said that to you. And we can all relate to this as a human being. I'm pretty sure you've had your spheres in your life that has impacted you, and I think we as humans, we're like, nah, it doesn't affect us, doesn't impact us. I call absolute crap on that one. Like, words have power. Words impact. They really do. And I could tell you countless stories of words having both negative and extremely healing repercussions and consequences. And I myself have really experienced pain through word, and I think it's a beautiful thing to allow yourself to just admit that it is really hard when someone says something specific to you in a certain way.
For sure.
So I think I'm going a bit on a tangent here, but
if you don't mind me jumping in, Dayna, and because it's something that you said that I really enjoyed as well, and it piggybacks off what you're saying with words and their power, and it's something that I really enjoy about Christianity, or I suppose most religions. Christianity is just like, I don't know, I feel like an easier buzzword in the Western world for these sorts of conversations. But I think for me, certainly, faith-based religions, I have them in similar bubbles, if you will. And that the beauty of words in these religions is prayer for me. And well, as you know, and many of my friends know, and if you're listening to this or have watched a Ket's podcast or like Untoasted, you probably would have got the feeling that I'm not a religious I'm not Christian, or I'm not an atheist. I hate these definitions. Anyway, it's not the point I'm trying to make, but I don't currently subscribe to any religion. But the act of prayer for me is probably the most beautiful thing that I can think of when speaking, or not debating, but chatting to people about their religions, their lack of religion, because, like you said, it was you viewed this decision from UCT as a deciding factor and an answer to prayer. And that in itself, to me, is just wonderfully bizarre, but bizarre in the most earnest way, if you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, I could talk about prayer.
So, yeah.
No, I think, I suppose I do want to make clear where I stand, because I know you know this. We've had convos, and
Sure.
you've chatted with my brother and all of that a lot, and you, like you say, you've been around our family. I just want to, I suppose, define where I stand, because I am like you, where I don't subscribe to religion either, and I know that is a statement that a lot of people maybe would be like, what does that mean? And I know that one of the ways to speak about Jesus is to refer to Christianity. I just have a very bit of a not so stoked approach to the way Christianity is an assumption to many people. It is an assumption based on stuff that they've seen or experienced, and I get that. I have experienced something that is not religious. And so I think I don't know if you want to, how like you'd want to maybe talk about that, but I know you wanted to ask me how Christianity like came around in life. I don't know where you want to go. It's just important for me to respond not from a place of no, I am not religious. That's what I want to say.
Okay.
I don't see myself as religious.
Oh no, for sure. And I think there might be a sort of like disconnect if you're listening to this and you've heard Dayna chat about Jesus and praying like, oh, she's not religious. Like, turn in your card, lady. Turn in your card. You're going straight to hell. But no, I didn't mean, and I think this is the problem with like the time we are existing in, is that words carry such weight, and they always have and they always will. But now people are very concerned with the binaries that exist. So when I say religious or define religious, if a person is a Christian or a Muslim, or, you know, like say you identify with Jesus and you believe in Jesus and all that stuff, for me, you are religious. But then I completely hear your definition where you don't subscribe to maybe whether that's the physical location of the church or the blanketed behavior of the church, because I mean, what does that mean? And for me, that goes back to this point where we live in a very nuanced world and everything is very complicated, that we're human beings and interconnected human systems, and like we spend half our days looking at phones and like trying to work out how to bump into someone enough times so that they fall in love with you. It's such a bizarre scenario. So it is complicated. And when people, and I completely hear what you're saying in terms of you don't want to be thrown under, or not thrown under that, but placed under that, because it then you feel, or I would certainly feel, that I have to explain the shortcomings of the Catholic Church and the rampant pedophilia associated, where it's like, no, this is my relationship with Jesus or Allah. Praise Allah. I love making Jesus and Allah jokes. It's up there with like some of my favorite things to do, but in a nice way, you know, everyone's got their thing. So you don't fit into that pigeonhole, which I don't think anyone does. That's why I think revolving like your politics around identity or identity politics is ridiculous. Like, but anyway, there's me going off on a tangent. I usually refrain from these and save them for the the untoasted episodes. But if you'd like to speak on anything that you felt in there, or maybe just redefine your position, you can go for it.
I think my heart is that I think it's so, as you say, it's so easy to assume something about someone based on a word that is ascribed to them or that they themselves subscribe to, or whatever it is. And I think my heart is, I wish I could right now tell, you know, my whole story and tell like how and tell why I even say what I do and why I post what I post and why and where that comes from. And because, yeah, I mean, you asked some questions in the talking points, and I don't mind like responding to them. If you want to go there, about.
Sure. Let's do that, because it kind of comes on the back of what we're saying here. So one of my fascinations with, and we'll use Christianity because I think it's accessible in this conversation that we're having, and why Christianity kind of has failed to take root with the youth. And that's certainly my understanding of today's society, that it doesn't seem as popular or prevalent. Again, this could be wrong. So I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Super interesting question. I've never like had that. I mean, it's something that you notice, but it's not necessarily something that people like verbalize and I suppose want to talk about. This was really interesting. Like I said to you, I was just gonna totally wing this whole thing. I didn't prep or like sit too long in some of your talking points, but I did read them. I get points for reading them.
Thank you.
And I appreciate them. I really value them. I really appreciate them. You know, I appreciate this about you. And so I was so interesting because the first thing that I thought of when I read that was culture. And I know culture is such a, I mean, you can't be reductionist about that word. Like, you can't simmer it down to one thing. But something that when you say Christianity hasn't taken root with the youth, kind of is something that I'm glad about, because I feel like in past generations, Christianity was cultural. Christianity was not based on a real life experience with God.
Facts.
And so someone would, and how many times among our parents' generations, our grandparents' generations, especially in the white English communities, is there, I can't speak for any other communities right now. I know other communities will relate to this, but I can only speak from mine right now. How often is, if there's a tick box on a form, is Christianity what is ticked? Meanwhile, has that person actually encountered God? Likely the answer is no. I obviously can't generalize, but when you go into someone's life deeper, how are they actually living? Do they live in a communion? Or, like, when I say communion, I'm not talking like Catholic communion. I'm talking like actual communion with a human being, like being in union. So I mean, you press a little bit further into someone's life who maybe says like, yeah, I'm a Christian, and then you're like, oh, okay, cool, tell me, like, how do you mean Jesus? Like, how's he impacted your life? Like, what in you has changed since you met him? Like, and then it's like blank face, and they're like, what are you talking about? And then I'm like, okay. And then I start to see and notice, like, as you grow up and as you know, go out into the world, that something that is culturally, you can either take something from culture and put on yourself, or culture can put something on you. Like, there's both of those pieces.
I think it does a bit of both as well. It's a give and take process on both sides. Continue. Yeah.
Sure. No, I agree. You can then, it doesn't mean that it goes soul deep. It doesn't mean that, you know? And so if something's going to truly change you, it has to be a personal decision, and it has to be something that, I think you one of your questions was something about breaking away from maybe culture or your parents.
Oh, yeah, no, exactly that, because it's what you've alluded to, and that a lot of Christian people, or a lot of core beliefs in human beings, are passed down from generation to generation, from parent to child to parent to child, to, you know, in an almost unbreakable sort of cycle. So if I'm, and I also used to say I'm Christian because my mom was a Roman Catholic sort of thing, but I mean, like, before a cricket match, I was like, Jesus, please, I need some runs, Jesus, you know, you haven't been there recently, big man, you gotta go. And then I'd get like, go out for 3 hours, like, didn't work, it can't exist. So, no, you know, and that's just because of what my parents believed. And, but I also think those sort of Christians get a sort of hard time as well, because, I mean, I used to be like, oh my word, this person just believes in God because their parents believe in God. And then I'd be like, at the voting booth, I was like, here we go, another vote for the DA. Why? Because my parents had voted for the DA. And it's all these, I've changed now, people, I've changed, I promise. And it's all these like core ideological and big beliefs that shape our lives, that if you really reflect on them, for the most part, have been passed down. And that's what you're breaking away from. And that's what I really like about when you say that you've had your own encounter with Jesus. And that for me is very powerful.
Yeah, I think you're really touching on something that I wish everyone could experience. That is my heart. My life has changed. My life was altered when I actually encountered the reality of God, not just God as a word, or God as something that you talk about, or God as something that is culturally around you. I was 19. It was late in my life when I actually encountered the presence of something that I cannot explain. I cannot. and I encountered this presence of a person that knew me and knew things about me, and through humans that I didn't know, told me things about myself, and I was like, how do y'all know this? Like, what? Like, it was straight up supernatural. Like, I can't explain it in human natural terms. And like, when you encounter something like that, you don't exactly leave the same way you came in, hey? And I was just like, what is this? And that's where all of what I am, say, do, share, how I approach people, how I encourage people, how my heart might break for people, might break for certain spaces. It's all based on what now has been 7 years of these experiences of some things that I cannot explain. I can't humanly explain them. And I think there's something about that. There's something so beautiful. I also wanted to touch back what you were saying. There's something so beautiful about things being passed down. And I don't think that should be undermined. However, we are human beings with our own access to decision, with our own access to choice, with our own access to, and by choice I literally mean like an internal. You can actually, if you look for something, you'll find it. Like, we have this kind of, I really believe that if you look for something, whatever that thing is, you'll find it. And whether that's a positive or a negative, it contributes, and so I'm not, I hope it's I hope it is clear that there is I believe there's a beauty in something being passed down from generation to generation, provided it comes with a disclaimer that the person it's being passed down to is told, you are you, and you do not have to believe because I believe. And why I'm saying this is because I then have it myself experience, and I've seen it in other people's lives. There's so much more power in my experience in having met Jesus in such a very like radical, very weird, like I can't explain it humanly terms way, because I was separate from, because I was allowed the freedom to step out from under like where maybe my parents, believe. And I think that it's far more powerful. It's not, not the most powerful, but I think it's very, very, very powerful when you are not expecting something and it finds you, or in fact you're pushing something away and it pursues you and hunts you down. And
that's right, Cape Town girls, stay away from me. Stay away from me.
Yeah, exactly. Sam, run. Just keep running. Keep running.
No, I'm joking. You're all lovely, ladies. You're all lovely. No, again, you, and that's why I was very excited and really wanted you to come onto this sort of podcast, because I knew that we would be able to get into this in some depth, which I think is very lacking in our moments of culture as young people. Is like there are not too many genuine moments of interaction. And I don't know, maybe you've come to this part of the podcast. If you're here, thank you already for staying for so long. But, maybe like, you feel very apprehensive when you hear Dayna talk about Jesus and that sort of stuff. And to this day, I have to get over the shock factor. And I've known Dayna and her family for many years. But once I get over myself and like my preconceived ideas of religion, which you've asked people to do when they think of it, and I hear sort of experiences and how you have this, not out of body, but strange experience that you can't put into words, that it gives me like goosebumps of sorts. And that's why I suppose maybe I used to like bash religion, but I'll make jokes about religion, of course. I love making jokes about everything. But it really speaks to what you were saying, and you raise that anxiety that I was saying, all things passed down are bad. It's not necessarily what you're saying, and I don't think you were calling me out on it either. It's, of course, culture is what keeps society together. If we didn't have that lineage and social cohesion, it would be a complete free-for-all. And where I'm at in my like faith journey, if you will, is I'm at a place where I understand all of these things to be shared narratives. So the story of Jesus or the coming of Christ and God and all that sort of stuff is a shared narrative that has shaped society, and that's, whether you believe in God or not, is irrelevant. Christianity has shaped society, especially the Western world. It dictates a lot of our like moral code and values that people have or live by. So once I got over that whole thing, like, oh my God, they think this oak in the sky is fixing their problems. Oh boy, do they have something coming. And trying to understand that these are all shared narratives that hold very different meanings for very different people. And if I can believe in democracy, whatever that may stand for to you, you can certainly understand and converse and take from something from someone who believes in Christianity, is Jewish, Muslim, whatever. So that's where I'm at in my sort of spectrum. And what I'd be very interested to ask you, because it's something that's always prevented me from really following Jesus or being Christian, and that is not only the language of the Bible, but some of the contents of the Bible and their interpretations. So for one, like there's a one true God. There can only be one God. Does that mean you denounce other gods in terms of that person is now celebrating Ramadan or in the process of Ramadan? And for me, that's one of the points. And it's something that's very sticky. And other parts of the Bible, just in terms of the language, I don't think appeal to me and my personality. I feel I'm being lectured to, coming before this higher being, which, if you believe it, is completely true. And I understand why you would feel that way. But it doesn't appeal to where I am in my life at the moment. So how basically this long ramble is, how do you incorporate, or I'd be interested in knowing how you incorporate the Bible into your life and into your understanding and living through Jesus. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, so I'll let you go from here.
Sure. So you asked the question, does believing in one God mean that you denounce other religions and how they exercise their faith and how they praise their God? No. Why would you spend time doing that? I know that some people find sadistic joy in bringing other people down, but that is not a reflection of the Father that I've gotten to know, and that is not a reflection of the person of Jesus that I've been invited to become like. And I've been invited to become like Jesus by Jesus himself, not by a pastor, not by a principal or a parent or a friend or myself. I've been invited to become like Jesus by Jesus himself through having a very alive relationship with him. And so when I say, why would you spend your time doing that? I mean, if we encounter, and this is actually going to lead to the Bible thing now as well.
Mm-hmm. Great.
If faith, the faith that I've been so graciously gifted the opportunity to experience in my life is based on encounter. It's not based on the Bible. It's I'll explain how the Bible, for me personally, has been linked to it, but it's I wasn't invited into a book. I wasn't invited into a club. I wasn't invited into a cult. Although no, those exist, and I will be the first to tell you.
I love a Christian
cult.
They're exciting.
Oh, yeah.
They're so scary.
Yeah.
They're so scary.
Shall we do an ep on one of those, eh?
Yeah. I'm down to go and
if you want to do an episode on some of the darker, weirder stuff.
No, this is supposed to be good press for faith. Come on, we're trying to straighten out the youth.
I think that's what you say is a joke, but I seriously, I don't have to defend Jesus. He can defend himself. I don't have to defend God. He can defend himself, and that is not my position here. I do not wish to defend the one who made me. I can't do that. How can I even do that? That makes no sense.
Can't be done.
And so can't be done. So yeah, I think a life life in Jesus comes alive when you meet him, when you get to know him, when you actually open your heart to having a relationship with him. And that relationship is what changes you. You can't read the Bible. Well, I think some people try to do this. I think some people think you got to read the Bible and just do what it says and like be different. But if you actually read the word, so much of it, pretty much majority of it, is about actually getting to know God so that you can, and that like getting to know him is what ultimately changes your heart. There are so many, like I'm a living test. I could tell you, like earlier you were saying, there's some like weirder stuff that happens. Like I could tell you some stories. Like I could tell you some, I'm sure you've heard some stories as well, probably through some of the crew. Like weird stuff happens that cannot be explained in the natural, like healings and people coming alive from the dead and the whole body's being reset and like, geez, like it's never ending, the stories. But for me, one of the most beautiful and profound miracles and testimonies is actually the human person themselves changing. And changing in ways that we didn't even know we needed. And I'm speaking from my own experience here. There are parts of me that exist now that never, ever, ever, ever used to be possible. And that I can only put down to this like work of kind grace, which has been this invitation to actually have a relationship with God. And so when you ask about the Bible, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like some of the language in the Bible isn't offensive to me. I'm not going to pretend that, because it is. It's like, it's, again, no matter what culture you're brought up in, whether that was 2,000 years ago culture or now culture, or culture in Asia or culture in the UK in 2020, like things are going to offend you. And I think going into life, you're gonna be offended. Like things are offensive because you have a way, but to not be afraid. I think we're afraid of offense, and this is one of the big issues that I actually have with our current like cultural climate, like in our generation especially. People are just offended all the time. We're offended, and we spend so much time in offense. I'm not saying that things aren't worth being upset about. Okay, I'm not saying that like that emotion and humanity is not in that. But one of the big things, I think, why you asked earlier, why has Christianity not taken root in the youth or whatever? It's because it's put, like the way it is understood by majority of the youth is as this offensive cage. Meanwhile, if you actually meet Jesus, whoever Christianity is, I don't know, but if you actually like meet Jesus himself, suddenly the Bible becomes an invitation to acknowledge that I'm not God. I can't understand his ways. I can't understand the way of life. I can't understand how life that I myself did not design or create works. And I think that's honesty, Sam. I think that's probably like where we could talk about this.
And you see, I love everything that you have said about that, because what a awful time you'd have to spend with yourself if your whole purpose was to like disprove someone being Christian or disprove another God, whatever your stance is from. And that's when I really got in touch with your family and saw that and saw the friends and like met other members of the God Squad. Oh, shucks. Anyway, I was like, these are very, these are people who are studying engineering. These are young people like me who are like interested in fashion. They're doing all sort of things. They drink, they behave naughtily. Naughtily? That's not a word, is it? They behave naughtily. Gemma, stop behaving so naughtily. And they had this completely different take on Christian, and that was the funny thing, because just like you, no one wants to talk about religion, no one wants to talk about Christianity, but it was more so like their relationship with God, and some were like big on God, they loved God, and others were bigger on Jesus. And I'll say it right now, to be on the record, the Holy Spirit and that sort of stuff, and the three of them, it confuses people, Christianity. Sort your shit out. Just make it simpler for everyone. Just say, who's going to be the CEO? If it's God, make him God, and then we understand. It's too confusing. But no, I'm only teasing. And there was this fantastic, I watched the Pursuit of Happiness like maybe 10 days ago, and it really made this one scene really, I was like, I have to talk about this with Dayna because it encapsulates everything. And I'd like to like see your reaction, hear your reaction. But there's one scene when Will Smith and his son in real life, of course, Jaden, continuity Hollywood, well done, awesome movie, cried a lot. But they're walking in the street and he just says, Dad, you want to hear a joke? And he's like, sure. And he says, okay, so there was this man drowning in the middle of the ocean and he's struggling and he's struggling. Obviously, I'm going to do this joke up. I'm not going to tell it like a toddler. Come on. And he's drowning and, he's having this terrible time. And a boat comes along and they say, jump in, we'll save you. And he says, no, God will save me. And the guys, they look at him, they say, this guy's insane, but what can you do? He won't get in. They sail away, and now he's really struggling. They're like sharks in the water. He's swallowed 6 liters of salt water, and he's really on the brink of death. And this other boat comes up to him, and they say, jump in, you're saved. And he goes, no, God will save me. And seconds later, he dies because he drowned. And when he gets to heaven, he says to God, hey, God, why didn't you save me? And then he's like, I sent 2 boats, you dummy. And I was like busy crying from the Pursuit of Happiness. And I was like, that's such a fun joke about religion and like faith. And like, this is what life's about. Because we don't know. We don't know. And we live our lives for so long with like these fixed beliefs. And you don't know. You don't know what really is happening in front of you. And we try and assess it as best as we can, like the boat and I'm waiting for God. But we can't make sense of it. And I think to have that central belief, that like axiom, that you are waiting for God and that like presence in or belief in Jesus, irrespective if it kills you or not in the story, it's just such a beautiful thing that like I observe in people. And I think it's fantastic, irrespective of whether it causes you to drown.
No, but Samuel. God uses community. He uses people. He uses family. So, like, I back that oak was stupid in waiting and not actually taking what God was bringing along.
Yes, of course, there are actual understandings and correct readings. I was trying to make a nice point about people who have, like, this faith-based system, and I think it's beautiful. And while we're still chatting a bit on this, because it's my last scripture reference I'll make for some time on Kids Eat Toast, I think, in a poking manner. And it's my favorite thing, but it's also a very interesting part. And I know we just spoke about like not really being on board with the Bible. But I love...
Didn't say not on board with...
No, but you know what I mean. I'm speaking in generalities to push the conversation forward. It's like, it's not the be-all and end-all. It's not this... It's more your relationship with Jesus or God or the Holy Spirit. And that's like thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. And that is beautiful. But the modern twist on it is that do people, we've got like, there's so many like horrible stories and sad stories going around, and depression, anxiety are prevalent in our society like never before. How as a society and a culture do we follow that like age-old tenet of Christianity when we don't necessarily, or people don't necessarily love themselves? And I thought that was a very interesting point to kind of just dance around, tiptoe around, if you will.
Okay, no, I like that. But I want to just say the Bible gets life when you have a relationship with him. That's what I wanted to say earlier.
Fair. So nice to clear it up. I like that.
It is a massively important part of getting to know God. But yes, yeah. Okay.
No, I hear what you're saying.
So your question is, how can one love someone else if one can't love themselves?
It wasn't so much a question. I just wanted to say it. I thought it was applicable. No, because no, I think it's one of those, like, not buzzwords, but those sort of terms that, like, oh, treat others as you like treat yourself, and you're like, oh, if people aren't treating themselves too well, or the flip side, which I find in a lot of people I know, and a lot of relationships I have with people, and I've also done it myself, but you also treat people, and this is provided you're a good person, I reckon, or maybe it doesn't make you a good person because it's messed up in itself. But you treat people much better than you'd ever treat yourself. And I'm not talking in terms of like direct actions. You give up your seat at the table so an older person can sit down or whatever, I mean, that internal and that non-stop dialogue that you're having in your head with yourself, you would never let that extend to another human being, especially if you're trying to be friendly or accommodating towards them. But that inner conversation we let ourselves have is maddening, I find. And then that also for me was a very interesting thing to be like, geez, people do need to spend more time, I think, and myself definitely included, like coming to grips and wrestling with these sort of thoughts.
I really love that you've brought this up. It's really interesting. I've never actually talked or like pulled this apart a bit. I actually want to answer with a question. Okay. I suppose like my response would be, but do you believe you're actually worth loving? And if you can't believe that, then I think that is a dead end. Then I think that there is going to be a consistent breakage in the attempt to love yourself well, so and then love others consistently. Because I think it's easier for a lot of people to love others than it is to love oneself, and I think most people in the world will agree, bar the odd person. They'll be rude. I'm not going to keep going with that one, but are
you talking about me? I know I'm like narcissistic. I know I'm a narcissist to a certain degree, but
no, I think what I wanted to say is and this is what has been one of the most beautiful points of freedom in my life, Sam, has been learning to believe I am worth loving. Learning to believe within myself, learning to believe that it all rooted in the fact that there is a truth that is spoken over me by the one who I've come to know, who has encountered me in my life, who I believe to have made me, because I don't know who else did, because like, how does one make a hand? Can we just talk about that? Like, how does one even make a hand? Okay. Yeah, no, it's quite something. How does one make a hand?
Yeah,
and so
haven't seen the science behind it.
I believe, yeah, and like, this, like, and I believe that, just take a look around, and I believe that there's proof everywhere we look that something made you.
Bryony Tregus, all creation testifies. There we go, Bryony. I don't answer any of your WhatsApps, but you're on the podcast now, so leave me alone.
Yeah. But yeah, that thing that she says, and that forms a foundation of what I'm about to say, which is where I don't know how to not believe that someone made me, that something made me. And if my encounters with that thing have been only love since the moment I met him, only love, only kindness, only compassion, only gentleness. And kindness can look like a kick in the bum. Kindness can look like a rap on the knuckles. Kindness can look like many things. It's not think that it's just a soft all the time. No, I'm consistently challenged by the one who like believes in me. And so that thing of like, do you actually believe you're worth loving? Because I really believe that that's what is one of the most powerful and most freeing things of encountering God and encountering Jesus for me, has been realizing that, well, he made me, therefore I was on purpose. I was made on purpose. I was made with purpose and on purpose. I'm not a mistake. So I actually can lean into that, and I can learn how to appreciate the things that I have and the things that I wasn't gifted with, like whatever. And then you realize, okay, hectic, that's what that looks like. Well, that's how that happens when I do that. And it starts to become an invitation to actually celebrate something that's been made, as opposed to, I really need to like work on not hating myself. Like it gets like a twist, you know. And I'm someone, I spent 23 years of my life hating, like self-loathing was my friend. And so I'm speaking from a very personal journey of learning that I am worth loving. And by that, I don't mean by people. I really don't. I'm like, whatever, peeps can love me, peeps don't have to love me, like we're Gucci. Seriously. Like, sorry, had to. That's a shout out. That's a shout out to Jodie Tate. That's Jodie's shout out. Okay. Gosh. That's Jodie's shout out. No, but seriously, like I'll be okay, because the one who actually matters to me, and the one who actually I believe like is the be all and end all of anything and everything that actually will ever happen, I know how he feels about me, and that is a gaze of absolute love and celebration. Why? And this is where I actually want to finish off on that. I want to round off on this, because this brings me back to the moment where I first met him. And when I first met him, what I encountered was a revelation that, why would I as an artist make something that I don't deem to be worth making? I wouldn't spend my time making something that I didn't deem to be worth making.
Sure.
And so I believe that I'm created in his image, and I believe that he's the ultimate artist, because how else does the sky look like it does, and differently every single night for the rest of ever? And so I believe that he's the artist. And so I don't believe an artist would make something, and I don't believe you, Sam, would be made without purpose and without being, you know what I mean? Like there's no like, that's,
sure,
so sure. That's where it comes full circle for me. And that's why for me, having the gift of art in my life is one of the greatest privileges I could have ever asked for, because I get to, in some small way, share with the way that the great artist works every day. I get to experience some of that process. So I'm gonna stop talking there.
No, again, it's a very beautiful sentiment that you share there. And to be honest, like the first reaction when you like almost cite reasons is a very defensive one, because I don't know, I think that's, you know, like, oh, well, you know, there could be other reasons. The sky is different at night, and, you know, but that's not the point. And I think when I grasped that, it really liberated me in the sense that I could go on my own, like, sort of journey of, like, truth finding, because I think that's a good way of looking at it, and, like, trying to find out what your truth is. And that's the thing, it's your truth. If you found yours through Jesus, that's amazing. You know, that's it. If I find mine like through, I don't know, some piece of literature that blows my mind, and, you know, each to their own. So it really, that sentiment of self-love, I think, was captured very well, or the lack of self-love was captured very well by Oscar Wilde, who was, of course, a tortured soul himself. And in one of his plays, I think it's An Ideal Husband, I'm not sure, but the character is Lord Goring, and he says something to the effect that the only thing to do with good advice is to pass it on. It's never of use to oneself. And when I first read that, I was like, haha, classic Oscar Wilde, that was funny. Because it is how we behave as human beings, you know, we're like, hey, I heard this, and then you're like, and you give a piece of advice, but you're like, would I have followed that in my life? And you're like, maybe not. So I think my takeaway is to start listening to my own sort of advice, because like you said, that it comes back to the question, do you think you deem yourself worthy? And back to what I was saying around, like, treating yourself as you treat others. And it's in Jordan Peterson's book. I know people. Doesn't mean I'm in love with Jordan Peterson. I do think he's intelligent. That's besides the point. It doesn't mean this is a right-wing podcast. God, I've had some interesting comments. But Dayna, I think that is a nice place to end it. Thank you very much for coming on. every encounter I have with you is always very genuine and sincere, and I hope that is able to play out in the podcast, even though we got many meters separating us. And yeah, I hope we're out of lockdown soon and can be happy and the world can be safe. So yeah, thank you very much.
I want to hang. I miss you. No, Sam, I just wanted to say thank you again. Like I've said throughout this whole thing, I so appreciate the welcome invitation to just come in honesty and like come in genuine experience. Yeah, and I'm going to end it with saying that, I believe this, and I wouldn't say it if I didn't believe it, but you are so worthy of being loved, my friend. And whether this is for you or for the peeps, this is me hyping you up for all the gals.
No, I'm done with that life. I am actually, hold on, you can stay for this. No one ever asks me what toast I brought, so...
Oh, what did you bring, darling?
Yeah, people, be wary of fake people, everyone. People tell you that you're worthy of love, but they don't even ask you what toast you have. So today it was actually a fan sent in the sourdough, freshly baked. Thank you. I'm going to receive abuse for these sort of comments. But yeah, sourdough, people, if you have like 16 to 18 hours of a day to dedicate to running between the oven and kneading dough, sourdough could be for you. I think that's how I'm going to end it. That's quite like, wow, radio. That's it. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this, share it with your friends, your mother, your ex. Share it with your matches on Tinder. Hell, share it with your dog. Even if you hated it, share it with the people you hate. We'll be back next week. Thanks so much.